Hey, what's happening, everybody? I'm Larry Roberts, and this is another episode of the Readily Random Podcast.
Hey, you could be larger than life, bigger than the world, living out the hopes.
Today's guest, it's really mind-blowing that I have this guest joining me today, and I've practiced this intro I don't know how many times, and I don't practice intros, guys, you know that. But today I have Ken Coleman with me. He's a career expert, a speaker, an author. I mean, the man has hit the trifecta of professionalism there. He's an acclaimed interviewer and a broadcaster. In 2014, Ken Coleman joined the Ramsey Solutions group. Is it a group? Is that fair to say? I don't know. You can correct me if you need to.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Cool deal. And, you know, Ken often co-hosts the Dave Ramsey Show as well. But hey, let's not just focus on Dave Ramsey. Let's focus on Ken Coleman. He has his own brand new show, or relatively new show on SiriusXM called The Ken Coleman Show.
Very creative.
Did I get that? Did I get that right?
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, Ken, welcome to the show, man. I appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time out of your very, very busy schedule to join me here.
Hey, I'm honored, Larry. You've got a great program. You're helping a lot of people, and I'm thrilled to be with you.
Man, you know, the program really is growing by leaps and bounds, and it's because of folks like you that are willing to share your knowledge and share your stories with my listeners. So thank you. If it wasn't for people like you, I wouldn't even have a show. So,
well, I'm thrilled, man. So let's talk. What are we talking about today?
Well, today, you know, I've been focusing lately on helping individuals find their strengths and focusing on those strengths and developing a career or pursuing an alternate career, but even if it's entrepreneurship, that leverages those strengths to allow them to live a more fulfilled and prosperous life overall. And I think you could talk about that, right?
Yeah, well, you know, you're focusing on something that matters so very much, and it's such a great indicator for people when they think about what it is that they were created to do. And those are those innate talents and strengths that you're talking about. So these are just given to us when we step into the world. As we begin to develop and grow, they're just things that every person has a strength in. Now, there are a few perfect people. We all know those people, right? We can think back to high school and we just couldn't stand them because they got straight A's. They were great in athletics. They could play instruments. We have a few of those special people that seem as though they are good at everything. But the reality is that most of us, Larry, are not good at everything, but we are good at something. And in realizing what it is that we're naturally good at, then we can begin to realize what it is that we really love to do. Because we as human beings, we don't like to do things that we're terrible at, except for golf. When it comes to golf, I enjoy that. But that's it. That's the only thing
I let it go. I let golf go.
Did you? See, you're a wise man. And see, I wish I had that kind of wisdom, but one day maybe I'll let go of it. But the reality is that when we can lock in to the things that we do well, what happens is we begin to experience one half of the equation of really doing work that matters to us. The other half is passion, but talent is not enough. Passion is not enough. You've got to combine the two of them. And so that's the simple construct that we talk about on the show every day as we help callers who call in looking for clarity. What is it that I do best? That's talent. What is it that I love to do most? So when we are in that proverbial sweet spot, doing work that matters, we are using our talent, what we do best, to do what we love to do most. And that is the formula. And everybody has talent. Everybody has passion. And when you figure that out, this is a life that is well lived, because it's not just work. You're doing work that matters deeply to you and to others.
And I hear exactly what you're saying. You know, as I get older, I know I don't look it because our conversation before the show, though, my beard is so luscious and brown. I am 46, so I struggle at times finding opportunities or even ways to step back from my career and start pursuing things that I truly am good at, the things that I'm truly gifted at. And I go, well, how can I possibly make this a career for me here? How do I disengage from my current career and start pursuing my passionate career?
Well, the way you do that, again, is you start to break it down. And it's we like to call it a purpose sentence on the Ken Coleman Show. I had a lady call in actually today from Brooklyn. She'd been listening. She had her purpose sentence. And this is how this process works. We go back to, what is it that I do best? So here's some basic questions for everybody that's listening. So the first thing you ask is, what have I always been pretty good at? What subjects came easy to me in school? What tasks or functions have just always been almost secondhand nature. They're just really easy for me. I see other people struggling in this and I go, that's weird. Why do they struggle with that? I'm good at that. Even the person that's been beat down can actually do this process and go back and say, okay, this is true. I've always done this very well. I may be good with my hands. I may be good with numbers. I may be a really good listener, whatever it is. So you begin to identify the top things you do well, top 2 or 3 things, what people compliment you on. And so those would be your list of talents and strengths. Then on the passion side, what is it that when you do it, time seems to just disappear? You could be doing it for 3 hours and it feels like 3 minutes. When you are in the process of doing it, you feel so alive and so joyous. Also, you anticipate this task or this function. These are good indicators of passion. A couple little questions here, 3 questions on the passion side that helps people is, who do I most want to help? What problem do I most want to solve? What solution do I most want to provide? It's essentially the same question, Larry, but asked 3 different ways to help us psychologically begin to get some breakthrough with these limiting beliefs. So if you begin to look at that, you go, okay, now I know what my top talents are and I know what my top passions are. I begin to look at them on the same piece of paper. Well, how can I take what I do best and do what I love to do most? And what you will find when you start to work through this exercise is that there might be 3, 4, 5, 6 different career paths or roles within that proverbial sweet spot. So the purpose sentence that I talked about, Larry, goes like this. Once we have the talents, the top talents and top passions listed out, we begin to write a sentence that looks like this. I was created to use my talents of blank, 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 however many it is, 2 or 3, to do blank, the work that brings me great joy. And this is a starting point. This isn't some angelic sound when you write it down the first time. It's different for everybody. But we know from psychology studies that the brain will fixate on what it is focused on. So if you look at this on a day-to-day basis, every morning, every night, and you do it with pencil and you rewrite it, you keep looking at it, what'll happen is you'll start, Larry, at a 40,000 foot view, if you will, from the jet. And as you keep looking at it, you'll get clearer and clearer and clearer and clearer. And then you come up with a sentence that is super specific. And then you go, oh, well, what are the 3 ways that I can do this? So we had a lady today, I'll give you an example. She called in and she had it. And she's very good at learning. And she's always been an exceptional learner. Just anything you teach her, she can learn. She's very good at communicating. And then she was very good at adaptability, very adaptable. And so she laid that out and she said, but what I really want to do is help young people who have learning development issues. But that took her 2 or 3 weeks to get that clear. And then even on the phone call, I said to her, well, let's be more specific. How are you going to help kids with developmental issues? What are we going to get to? And at the end of the phone call, we realized that she really loves math and numbers, one detail she didn't give me. And she realized, well, I want to teach kids that are struggling with math. I want to be, a math coach, a math teacher, a math tutor. And so that's the process. And it can get very specific, but it starts with a process of discovery.
So, Ken, let me ask you, you use the analogy of jumping out of the plane and we're at the 40,000 foot level, 30, 20, 10. It's getting clearer and clearer. What happens if it gets so clear we make impact before we can make that change? I know that happens to a lot of us, but what are some of the ways that we can bounce back, and not necessarily off the ground, but bounce back and find ourselves back in a position to potentially take another jump?
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand the question. I think if you're using that analogy and you're getting clearer and clearer and clearer, the only way that you hit the ground is if you jump too soon. I think that's maybe what you're alluding to. And
okay.
Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, it's fair enough. That's a fair enough answer. We say we're getting clearer and clearer, and we think we found that path, we found that solution, but we go for it, and we find ourselves coming up short. Mm-hmm. And whether it be, we may feel fulfilled, right? Mm-hmm. As an entrepreneur or as the lady that wants to help children understand math or whatever it may be. But, the reality too is we still got to pay bills. We still got to do real life stuff here. Yeah. So what happens when we jump off the plane and we go, oh, I see my vision, but oh crap, there's life, smack.
That's right. Yeah, that's a good question. And so the issue is we don't jump off the plane. So we get this question all the time on the show. Ken, I know exactly what I want to do. How do I get there? And if this analogy that you've given us is, okay, I'm really clear on what I want to do, but I've got $40,000 in debt. I got 2 kids in school. I got a wife. I got medical bills, whatever the situation is. So what we're going to do there is we're going to incrementally over time move into the dream job, but you do not leave the day job. Or if you do, you're going to have that smack the ground experience you're talking about. So 2 things there. Number one, when I started out into broadcasting, Larry, I still have 3 kids and a wife. They were under the age of 5, and I had my own business, and I couldn't go full time into broadcasting. I couldn't even take a broadcasting job making $50,000 a year. I would have starved.
Sure.
Okay. I had a previous lifestyle. I had all this stuff. So I had bills. I had it all. And I had to do the broadcasting thing on the side over a 7.5 year period, 7.5 years. So the question becomes, are you willing to do what it takes? Because life is real, like you're talking about. It's not just, I can go jump and quit. If you're single and you have no debt, no bills, and no responsibility, you can do that. But most of us can't Geronimo jump out of the plane. And so what we want to see you do is over time, you build up to it. You replace some of your income. You pay off debt. You do the things that you have to do so that you can do the things you want to do. This is just good old fashioned common sense. It's not a microwave process. So that's the one scenario. Now, to your other part of your question, what happens if you did jump? You were clear on what it is you wanted to do, but you failed miserably. Then get back up. And this time around, let's be smart about it. So if you got to go back and get a full-time job and work for the man for 40 hours a week and get restabilized, get yourself back in order, wipe off the scrapes and the bruises and all that and get healed. And then we get right back to, okay, I learned something from this massive failure. So now I can actually move forward with a lot more intelligence, a lot more wisdom, and some more courage because I actually lived. This is huge.
Sure.
So, you know what? I'd like to see you avoid the splat, but if you get the splat situation, get back up, learn from it, get stable, and launch the dream to the point where eventually it's like a boat coming in for you and it gets closer and closer and closer to the dock to the point that I step out onto the boat. I don't have to jump out and swim. And I think that's what some people think, that chasing the dream is this cliff dive into deep, choppy waters. It shouldn't be that way.
You know, and that's why I asked that question or even proposed that scenario, because too many times we hear these feel-good messages that say, do what you need to do to fulfill your life and live your life.
Mm-hmm.
You know, jump off the cliff. I think Steve Harvey's got a story where he eventually had to jump and hope his parachute opened. Look, I mean, Steve Harvey, maybe he nailed it, right? But he did a lot of work in the background that nobody really knows about. There's not a whole lot of those overnight successes that are really overnighters. But we continually hear, do it, just do it. Quit your job, go do your thing, jump in there and live your life. And too many people come up short and they are left with mortgages or repossessions or their house has been foreclosed on. And you said the 2 words, common sense.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of times, especially in my experience, my common sense has a tendency to get overrun by my desire, by my dream. I'm like, oh, I can do this. This is great. I opened a karate school way back in the day. I was in my mid-20s. I opened it in a warehouse. No heat, no AC. I thought, man, these guys, if they want to train real karate, they're going to come and they're going to train in the warehouse. That didn't quite work out the way I had it planned. But I quit my job. I ran karate full time, and I failed miserably. You know, but again, it was my dream and my passion to have a karate school back then, and I jumped in there. But man, I sure came up short, and I had a hard time. I mean, I had ended up having to go to a temporary job agency to even get a job at that point.
That's right.
And that's when you find yourself picking yourself up off the ground, going, wow, how did that not work out the way Steve Harvey told me it was going to? And I'm picking on Steve. I don't mean to pick on Steve, but that's his speech is the one that's really standing out.
Well,
take Gary Vee, take take anybody right now. Gary Vee's hot as can be, and he's always saying that. So why can't I be Gary Vee? I can get up and I can drop a few F-bombs and I can be the man.
Well, I think you got to listen to what Gary's saying. Gary's a friend of mine. I've had the privilege to interview Gary a few times. Gary is not saying to leave your day job and strike out for the dream job if you can't pay your bills. He'd be the first one to get in your face and say, hey, man, appreciate that, Larry, that story. And I love that. But if you are honest with yourself, You didn't have a backup plan. You just went after it. You didn't save up for it. You didn't save up for your first year's expense, or you went into debt or whatever it is. And by the way, just because you failed, that doesn't define you. You know, the 46-year-old Larry I'm looking at right now learned a lot from that experience. So I think what's happened is, I think you're making a very good point. I want to say amen to what you're saying. I think we've romanticized the jump, and it's jump out, and I think it's jump in. So I think there are too many people that are sitting on the sidelines of life, and they think that in order to get after it, they've got to do this crazy jump off the cliff or jump out of the plane, as opposed to the more milder version of that, and that's jump in. Just jump in. Just get in the water. Get in the pool with everybody else. Just see what it's like. Let's just take some swim lessons. Let's get out there. I like jumping in, not jumping out or jumping off. You know, I think that, you know, this idea, it's really romantic. Oh, jump out of the boat. Well, no, you're going to drown. If you don't have the training to be able to swim and tread water for 2 hours. You're going to drown if you don't have a life preserver. There's no honor in drowning. So why is there honor in making a stupid leap? And so I agree with you 100%. Here's the deal. The great men and women that I've studied, that I read about, they had long journeys to what we now read about in their biography. Long, hard journeys, full of doubt, full of failure. And yet, despite the doubt and the failure, there's one thing that remains. They persevered. Mm-hmm. They learned from failures. They learned from dealing with fears. They learned from the doubts and all that stuff, and they just stayed with it. And, you know, I think if you're willing to do, many times on the phone, I'm not looking at them, it's on the phone. I'll just say to a caller, I'll ask them, get them to the point where they go, yeah, it might take me 7 years to pay off the debt and then go pay myself through medical school. And I'll say, are you willing to do it? Are you willing to work in that job right now that's not your dream job? You don't hate it, but you don't love it. Are you willing to do that for 7 years? Because it's your stability. It's the fuel that you need to actually make it. Are you willing to wait 7 years to do what you just told me is your dream? And always the answer is, yeah, I am. And so that becomes the $1 million question.
Right. I agree 100%. And so in along the line of this conversation, let's go ahead, let's back it up just a little bit and let's face facts that we do work the 9 to 5 job. Mm-hmm. And there are, according to some of your notes that I've been reading up, I did my homework. I didn't come in here blind. There's 3 main emotions that we experience when people are working, and that's they're either stuck, they're scared, or we've kind of found that sweet spot. How can we find that sweet spot in our 9 to 5 while we're slowly making the transition to our strength career?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great question. Same formula. You know, most of the people that are holding down a good, solid job that aren't super thrilled with it, they're there because they're competent. So that's the talent side. So you clearly got the talent to do the job. But you're asking really, where does the passion come in when there's really not passion there? And I think that's where you got to dig deep and you got to say, why do I need this job? You know, you start looking at the basics. Well, I needed to take care of my wife and kids. I needed to pay the bills. I needed to pay off debt. I needed to be able to go on vacation. You know, you start to look at it and you begin to have an attitude of gratitude. And so when you're in a place where at least you're good at it, but the work itself doesn't matter that much to you, I'll tell you what'll change that is gratitude. I'm thankful for what I have. I'm thankful that I know where I'm going. I'm thankful I know how long it's going to take. I'm thankful that my wife is supportive. I'm thankful that my boss believes in me. I'm thankful that I got a chance to get a raise. I'm thankful that I can go on vacation. I'm thankful that my kids are healthy. I'm thankful that I can pay for their medical bills. You start running this exercise and all of a sudden that job that you're dreading getting out of bed on a Monday morning because there's no passion, you start to go, well, this job is the platform for me to step off of day job into dream job. Now all of a sudden, I've got some zest, I've got some zeal, I've got some enthusiasm in a job that otherwise doesn't have that for me. But if I have that kind of attitude, I go, oh, I can do this. Are you kidding me? I'm blessed. I can do this for 5 more years. You bet I can. I've got something to add. I've got something to offer. I'm talented at it. And I can find a way to find a why anywhere.
Is it ever too late? As I mentioned before, I'm 46. Here I am. I've got a 20-year career underneath me. And man, who knows? Am I going to be around to see even 50? I don't know. My dad checked out pretty early.
Yeah.
You know, is it too late for me?
Well, the way you pose that question, I mean, that's a tough one to answer. Obviously, I don't know
I don't mean me specifically.
Yeah,
but
I know. But I'm just saying, if we look at in terms of how many years I've got left, well, none of us know.
Sure.
So from that standpoint, you have to live as though it's never too late. I guess, technically speaking, if a 75-year-old calls me and goes, hey, I want to do this, and maybe there's some limits to the 75, 80-year-old, but I don't like saying that. So maybe there is. I guess you could make an argument there. So for those of you listeners that are sticklers on that, I'll just bail on that. But I don't believe that it is too late to do work that matters to you. So for instance, the 75-year-old sweet spot may be different than that same person had at 55.
Oh, sure.
Let me give you an example. I have shared a story on my show recently about a crossing guard, and I forget what state it's in, but it's this old guy, and I think he's like 78 years old, a retired military veteran, and then after he retired from the military, had a long career in business, but now he's a widower, and his family doesn't live close to him, his kids, and he serves this middle school as a crossing guard, but he doesn't just keep the kids safe doing the crossing guard stuff. He high-fives these kids. He gives them a little nugget of encouragement. And I shared this story on the show, and they had went back to kids that are now in college who talked about having bad days, feeling bad about themselves in middle school. And this guy became almost like this adopted grandfather for him and just encouraged them every morning when he saw him, or he'd see him around campus. And this is a guy who at 75, he's retired. He had a sweet spot in his life, was very, very, very talented, a business leader. But one of his core talents was that he had empathy. Now, this wasn't in the article. I just know this.
Sure.
And he used at 75, he doesn't need to be out working. And that's not his thing. He can't go in the corporate world. But what he can do is still find a way to use his talents and passions. And I can tell you right now, this guy loves people.
Sure.
But one of his core talents is empathy and compassion. Empathy is not the same as compassion. Empathy is, I understand the shoes that you walk in. I understand how you're feeling. But compassion is, now I'm going to act on that to alleviate that problem or that challenge. And so that's what he was doing, was loving on kids in a really small space, a microcosm in time, if you will, but had terrific impact. So I would say it's never too late to be who you were created to be. That's what I'll say, ever. I don't care at 85, 95. I hope a 95-year-old Ken Coleman is still being who I was supposed to be. The context is going to be different.
Sure.
But I can still be who I was created to be.
Cool. Love that answer. That's awesome. And I got to find out more about the story of the crossing guard. That's an excellent story.
Yeah, I need to find that. I'll tell you what, when we get off the air, I'll have my assistant producer find that story and send it to you. It's a great story.
Oh, that'd be awesome. I'd really appreciate it. So, Ken, we've kind of gone about this a little bit backwards. We put the excitement at the front of the show because we had to snag the listeners, right? Then we backed it up to we had a little reality check. Mm-hmm. Now, I would like to give the listeners on the way out something actionable, an action plan. And making a plan is a very, very critical component to making that transition from your current career or your current mm-hmm. job, whether it's a career or not, it's up to you, and making that transition over here to my entrepreneurship or whatever my dream job would be. So mm-hmm. what are some of the steps that people could take, even on the local level? Because I know we get a lot of information at times of, well, do this, do that. But what could John Smith do today to start making his plan and mm-hmm. and putting it into action?
Well, there's a couple things I'll say. And I love that you said, what can he do locally? I love that, because I think a lot of people feel like in order to pursue what they want to do, they got to go somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And I've got this thing called the law of the zip code. I think I've said this publicly 3 times. So here you go. The law of the zip code says that everything I need to get started is already around me. Everything I need to get started is already around me. So awesome. To your question, one of the things is I want you to sit down and think about who you can get in front of that's doing what you want to do. I mean, just think about it in your area. And what you'll find is they're out there. You'll also find that people like being an expert. So if you're polite and you have any kind of sense of manners and say, hey, a friend of a friend recommended I get in touch with you, or hey, we know each other, whatever it is. So through acquaintance or direct relationship or through a family member, you reach out and you say, hey, I want to get into coding and I understand that you're a really good coder. So fill in the blank, folks, whatever it is. and you say, can I take you to coffee or lunch sometime? I just want to pick your brain. I'm in this space. I want to get in your space. I'd love to ask you. I'd love to just interview you. Now, let me tell you something. If you're not cuckoo and weird and goofy, they're going to say yes. So you take them to lunch, you take them to coffee, and you take a pad of paper and a pencil, and that's it. Don't talk about yourself. Ask them questions, how they got into it, why they got into it, what are they learning now, what's the future of coding. For somebody like me who's never done it, what do you think I need from a qualification standpoint? If it's education, what would you recommend? You just ask them everything about what they do, and they're going to open up like crazy, and you're going to essentially walk away with a master's degree in what it actually takes to do what you want to do. That's one step. Okay. Now, the second step is when you begin to meet with 1, 2, or 3 of those people. I recommend multiple people so you get a lot of different insight. Then I want you to sit down and go, okay, I've got some real street knowledge. This is a real practical list of things I need to know and do. Know and do. Know and do. That's your practical takeaway list. So then you sit down and you begin to do some research. And this is all about how long is it going to take me based on the time to get certified or qualified or learn what I need to learn. How much is it going to cost me? And remember, cost, Larry, sometimes affects how long it's going to take.
Sure.
These are the realities. So when you get all that practical information, how much is it going to cost me? How long is it going to take? 2 super simple questions. This is not difficult rocket science. How much is it going to cost? By the way, that's time and money. And then how long is it actually going to take for me to be able to pull this off? When we know that it's going to take 3 years to climb the mountain, we can do that. But it is the unknown that paralyzes us. It's just too scary. Oh, I don't know. So we don't even want to deal with the unknown. But when we know how long it's going to take and what it's going to take, then we can summon up the courage to step out on the journey. And so the steps, the map reveals itself once we get the answer. So that proximity to people that are doing what you want to do locally, that's huge. That's huge. And here's the other thing. Listen to podcasts like Larry's. Listen to YouTube talks and TED Talks and webinars. People that are doing what you want to do. There's all kinds of stuff out on the internet. I just gave you the local zip code answer. But who can you learn from out there for free or little to no money on that big thing called the interweb?
Yeah, exactly. And, I think that was one of the reasons I asked, and I specifically said locally, because as you said earlier, too many people see these conversations and they hear these talks like you and I are having, and they think they have to run off to a $10,000 seminar or they have to, whatever it may be. And you just don't have to do that. I love exactly what was it again? What was the tagline? Your zip code? Well,
the zip code. Everything I need to get started is already around me. So I love what you just said. It's not the $10,000 seminar you need to go to. You need to go buy a $10 cup of coffee. 2 cups of coffee is $10, and that $10 will give you more return than the $10,000 seminar. I'm going to tell you that right now. And we have overcomplicated this, and I'm so glad you asked me about this. I'll give you another thing. It's the proximity principle. I'm writing a book right now, Larry. Just turned in the manuscript, coming out next May. It's called the proximity principle. And the proximity principle says, in order to do what I want to do, I've got to be around people that are doing it and in places where it is happening. This is all you need to know about getting where you want to go. Proximity to people that are doing what I want to do and getting in places that what I want to do is happening. So here's how it works. When I'm around those people, they're going to make sure they're going to tell me what places I need to be in. And then when I go get in those places, guess what? I'm going to meet more of the right people who are going to teach me, connect me, maybe even hire me. This is such a profoundly simple thing, but it takes hustle and it takes courage because you will get rejected. You will get ignored. But if you stay with it, you're going to find yourself at a train station of opportunity.
That's exactly right. And just real quick to capitalize on that as well, I was listening to a presentation this past weekend by Dave Jackson. He's a podcasting OG. I mean, he's been around since I think 2004 when the whole platform was launched. And he was telling a story about someone, quote unquote, that they were a unknown comedian forever and they worked bars and even no matter where it was, if they could do a comedy show, they did a comedy show. Eventually they got called to the Tonight Show. They got called over to the Couch with Johnny Carson. This tells you how old the comedian is. Mm-hmm. Got called over to the Couch with Johnny Carson. they performed on the Tonight Show for 8 years before they got their own show. They eventually got their own show, and it wasn't well received for the first 4 years that it was in production. And that comedian today is Jerry Seinfeld.
Mm-hmm.
Took him a total of 17 years.
That's right.
To reach that overnight success.
That's exactly right.
But he kept grinding, man. He kept grinding, and now he's Jerry Seinfeld. That's all you need to say.
That's right.
So
it's a great story, and his story is wonderful. And I think here's the problem, is that people don't know those stories.
Right.
They just see Jerry Seinfeld and they think, oh, he's super talented and he got all the breaks. Not true. He's a very insightful dude. I don't know if you've seen his stuff with Howard Stern and some of his interviews he's done, even on Comedians in Cars. He'll get serious at times, but he's a guy that stayed with it and just refused to quit because he absolutely had to do it. And see, that's the whole point, is finding work that if you don't do it, you're not complete. You're not whole. You're not, because work is who we are. We are created to work. And you got to find stuff that you just can't keep from doing.
No, I agree. And I appreciate the insight. Ken, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. I know you've given me a lot of your time already this afternoon. Before we go, though, tell us about your SiriusXM show. It's a new show. Is that it? Or tell us all about it.
Yeah, I think it's new. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, I work for Dave Ramsey. He's been on the air 25 years. Hello. So we're 1 year old.
Okay.
And we launched on SiriusXM. We're on every day, Monday through Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern on 121. And I believe they replay it on mornings and evenings on 111. But it's a caller-driven show. So people are calling in and they're just simply looking for clarity. They're looking for confidence. They're looking for courage, trying to figure out what it is they were created to do, or if they know what it is, how do they get there? We get a lot of career questions. Hey, I'm here. I got a fork in the road. Which way do you want to go? And your listeners have really heard the construct that I continue to use. And I just ask questions. And here's the reality. I say this every day. I don't have the answers. The callers already have the answers. It's my job to ask questions. And I use questions like a scalpel. And we are in the heart business. That's what the Ken Coleman Show is about, is discovering what is on your heart that you passionately want to do and giving you that clarity so that you can confidently step forward. And then when you have the clarity and confidence, there will be times where you'll need courage, but you must have clarity and confidence first. Courage comes from those two things. And so we really are helping people one call at a time, having a blast. I mean, seeing people's internal lights coming on, their pilot lights are fired up, and it's really exciting that people step into what they were created to do.
That's awesome, man. Thank you once again, Ken. Give me just 2 seconds to wrap this up, and then I'll be right back with you. Hey, everybody. Thanks once again for listening to another Today Was Awesome episode of the Readily Random Podcast. And remember, if you want to start your own podcast, be sure to check out my book, 1+1 = Podcast, where I simplify the equation of podcasting success. Thanks, everybody. We'll talk again soon.